Even if I can speak in all the tongues of earth, and those of the angels too, but do not have love, I am just a noisy gong, a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy, such that I can comprehend all mysteries and all knowledge, or if I have faith great enough to move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away everything I own to feed those poorer than I, then hand over my body to be burned, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient, love is kind. Love is not jealous. It does not put on airs, and it is not snobbish. It is never rude or self-seeking. It is not prone to anger, nor does it brood over injuries. Love doesn't rejoice in what is wrong, but rejoices in the truth. There is no limit to love's forbearance, to its trust, its hope, its power to endure. Love never fails. Prophecies will cease silent, knowledge will pass away. Our knowledge is imperfect, and our prophesying is imperfect. When the perfect comes, the imperfect will pass away. When I was a child, I used to speak like a child, think like a child, reason like a child. But when I became an adult, I put childish ways aside. Then we will see face to face. My knowledge is imperfect now. Then I will know even as I am known. There are, in the end, three things that last: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Ancient words from our tradition for our present-day understanding.
Christmas gets very hectic in most church offices, and ours is no different than that. So the sermon title you see in your bulletin, so if you're, is what does it mean to say that God is love? Particularly progressive churches, we say that almost every week. But what does it mean? I've preached before that, God is a very mysterious word, and whenever we use it, we mean something different. But there's a sense in which love is also maybe the most deeply personal word of all. And so a lot of times we use the same words, and we're not anywhere near meaning the same thing. But I think it's an important question to ask, particularly at this time of year. What does that mean? We've all known human loves that disappointed us. We love somebody, they don't love us back, or vice versa, cave in. Surely Paul is talking about something more stable than that. But when we say God is love, if we're not very careful, we have to pretend that our experiences are much more loving than they are, because life can be brutally hard at times. And if our theology is too simplistic, we can wind up with a very unhelpful view of religion. That becomes possibly our greatest problem in times of crises. So, you heard the song? The song of the cell phone. Instead of the bell choir, we should use cell phones next year. And just tune them up. Tune them up. Paul is talking about something very mysterious when he talks about love in this passage. And it's usually restricted to weddings is when we pull this passage out, which I think ties it to romantic love, which, for many people does not last, if it doesn't get deeper than that, too far into the marriage. What is this thing that Paul says is more abiding than our philosophy, our prophecy, our religion, our practice, our miracles? Paul covers the base of what religion can be. And so if religion doesn't lead us to love. And then he lists what love is like, what it feels like. It's patient, it's kind, this kind of thing. I believe that this passage in Paul comes from an early time in the Christian religion when it was a mystery religion. And you had something like 3 years of training to get this experience that in the East is often called enlightenment. But in the church, I believe when they talked about being in Christ, they were talking about a sense of interconnectedness, of inner being, that changes our definition of who we are. Part of what makes me think that this passage is about that is that image of the mirror, which is something that was used in the mystery religions. They used things like torches, caves, a lot of the imagery that Paul uses. And he talks about when you look in the mirror, now that was to realize who you are. You didn't go to catechism class and learn all kinds of facts that have nothing to do with who you are. All kinds of hypothetical beliefs about hypothetical beings. What they were trying to do is take the little loves you have for yourself and your friends and expand them into a kind of sense of universality and interwovenness with all that lives and breathes. And when you looked in the mirror and you saw that, not just the little self so frightened with so many problems, but as life, as a cell in the common body. It was a tremendous experience. And the purpose of the symbol God was to lift beyond what a human being is capable of and give a God's eye view of something broader than any human mind can think, deeper than any human heart can feel. So we'll be looking at that passage. We'll also be looking at one of the great hymns of Christmas. It came upon the midnight clear. Now, like the other great hymns of Christmas, if you just look at the surface of this, it's kind of depressing. The Christmas story is kind of depressing when you just look at it. Herod rules this part of the world. A poor family is trying to flee political oppression. They're going to have to leave the country. And yet there's cosmic joy in the story. And what the hymns do is take us at our lowest place and say, you can be happy and peaceful there. They're not saying you have to get depressed to understand what they're talking about. When times are good, you enjoy that. You enjoy it, you hold on to it for as long as you can. But when the good times pass, you don't have to panic. Because when there isn't happiness, there's wisdom. There's growth. Our hymn today is written by a Unitarian. We're still going to listen to it, though. Now, the great thing about Unitarians is they don't tend to take things literally. So when they talk about angels, they're not talking about, are there these disincarnate beings that were singing a song and nobody in Bethlehem seemed to notice it? They're flitting about. It's a poem to help us understand in that place. The poet is hearing a kind of music, but he's hearing it through his sadness, through his despair. Edmund Sears wrote this poem, who had reached his goal. He was at a great big church, and he had what we used to call a nervous breakdown. Now, maybe it was too much for him to handle, or maybe that wasn't really where his heart wanted him to go with his life. But he finds himself years later in a very small church, and he sits down and writes a poem. It's a poem about Christmas, but it's also a poem about the experience that he's having, both of the sadness and despair, but of a cosmic joy, of a music that he's hearing all around him. It came upon the midnight clear, that glorious song of old, from angels bending near the earth to touch their harps of gold. Peace on the earth, goodwill to all, From heaven this message we bring. The world in solemn stillness lay to hear the angels sing. Now in Hebrew, the word angel simply means messenger. And we think we're being more religious by making them winged creatures. But that also means you're probably not going to see a lot of them if you do that way. Have you ever been so depressed, so lonely, and have a dog jump in your lap or a cat? And all of a sudden that situation was redefined? It wasn't just what was happening. You were remembering a larger love, a larger interconnectedness. There are angels all around us if we're not looking for people with feathers. Whatever brings this message, peace on earth, goodwill to all. What Reverend Sears realized was that message alone opened his heart. It didn't take his problems away. It didn't take his sadness away. But he was able not to be defined by his sadness. He could still hear the music and see the beauty around him. Have you ever been on an airplane and it goes through the clouds and your whole mood changes when you see everything? Or get up on the top of a mountain and look out? You still have the same problems, but they're not defining you anymore. What's happened is you've fallen out of the center of your story, and now you're part of something bigger. It's not our fault that when we start out in life, we think we're the center of the universe. That's what it looks like. That's what it looks like. It looks like everything's happening to me. And what the mystery religions were trying to teach people is that they're the branch, they're not the trunk of the tree. Still important, still vital, but life makes a whole lot more sense when we're not trying to figure out why it's happening to us. Because the answer is it isn't. It isn't happening to us, it's just happening. Somebody dropped a safe on the top of the skyscraper and you were just walking to work. Makes a lot more sense. Of when a very famous photo was taken. That's the photo from the lunar orbiter of the Earth rising up behind the moon. It's been 50 years since that picture was taken. And that image decentered humankind, many people, from their view of things. Up until that point, there had been a race to get to the moon. It was the United States against Russia, and that's all that mattered. If they didn't kill us, we were going to have to kill them. Struggle, turmoil, unending. That year, 1968, was a brutal year. The Vietnam War was taking place. The nation was incredibly divided. Martin Luther King was assassinated. Robert Kennedy was assassinated. This photo gave some people a context that was bigger than those tragedies, than that war. When the ancient poets talked about angels, they were talking about that God's eye view. Because life may never work out for you and me. It may not work out for the United States. If we don't come to our senses, the best thing that could happen for the rest of the world would be this implosion that's taking place. I don't wish that on us. But if you care about the whole world, we've got to change or pay that ticket. We can't be the colonizers of the world anymore. We have to let that go. Cosmic, that includes our friends and our enemies. And recognizes the worth of every human being. When the astronauts looked out and saw this image, they weren't ready for it. They weren't prepared for that. They're scientists. They were not in the heart place. And they only had one camera that had film in it that would record color. So they feverishly, and only then did they realize what they had just experienced. And one of the astronauts read, "How do you turn to religion?" I don't even know if he had ever been to church in his life. I don't know. But human language, they had to step out of ordinary language. And so he said, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." And then he said this, these are people that had raced, their lives had been put on the line trying to beat the Russians to the moon. Looking at that Earthrise, as it was called, they said, "From the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good earth." Our Unitarian friend was talking about peace on earth, goodwill to all. It's the one song that helps our heart expand to its full measure. And even if the world doesn't change, we change when we let our hearts sing that song. One poet, Archibald MacLeish, is that how you say his name? Close enough. He wrote this, and Carl Sagan quotes this poem all the time, or he did before he died. That's a spoiler alert if you haven't. To see the earth as it's small and blue and beautiful in that eternal silence where it floats is to see ourselves as riders on the earth together. I'll say siblings instead of brothers. Siblings on that bright loveliness in the eternal cold. Siblings who know now that they are truly family. It's the song of the angels. The way the poet said it, Reverend Sears, he sees the world around him. This is the Mexican-American War has started, and all of a sudden American innocence is dead. Right? We're capable of every kind of crime and thuggery that every other nation is. He said, "Yet with the woes of sin and strife, the world has suffered long, rolled 2,000 years of wrong. And soul at war with soul hears not the love song which they bring. Oh, hush the noise, ye souls of strife, and hear the angels sing." I don't think religion can always change the world, as much as we talk about social justice and charity and compassion, all this kind of thing. The world can be a very cold and hard place, but our hearts don't need to be. And sometimes the message we need is that our heart needs to be tuned toward a larger song. The people who lived out the Christmas story, we don't even know if they existed. The shepherds, the wise people. But the world was governed by the same thugs when they died that governed when they were born. This is a message larger than politics. It certainly has a political meaning. We are called to give our lives in the struggle for a better world. But our hearts don't have to live in turmoil while we do that. They can live in peace. They can live in joy if we remember this larger song. We don't need a different planet. We just need to care for passage. In Corinthians, he said, "We do not yet see things clearly. We are squinting in a fog, peering through the mist. But it will not be long before the weather clears and the sun shines about." This may be inside him, it may be outside him. It will not be long before the weather clears and the sun shines bright. We will see it all then. See it as clearly as God sees us, knowing God as directly as God knows us. But for now, until that completeness comes, we have three things to do. trust steadily, hope unswervingly, love extravagantly. I don't think those who say that God is love are necessarily naive people. Some of them have given their lives in this. But what they've trusted is that love is stronger than hatred. It's more abiding. It lasts longer. Here's one poet put it like this. We know in our deepest heart of hearts that unconditional love is somehow more true, more fundamental, more real, more radical than hate, which always seems to be confused, deluded, reactive, divisive, and false. The hymn we're going to sing together in a moment was written by a minister who was depressed, but the depression didn't define him. And what he wanted to share with other people who were in low places of the heart is that there's music still for us to hear. He put it this way. Still through the cloven skies they come, with peaceful wings unfurled, and still their heavenly music floats o'er all the weary world. Above its sad and lowly plains, they bend on hovering wing, and ever over its babble sounds the blessed angels sing. Something happened to the astronauts who saw the earth that day. They were born again, in a sense, in that they returned to their same houses, their same families, but they saw a bigger world. Paul invites us to that larger world. He says if we have every other type of religion in the world, it won't mean anything in the long run. We can have magical powers, we can have prophetic powers for the year, but if we have not love, we are nothing. He says, hold on to love. Because for all the pain, there is beauty. And it is the one beauty that abides. I invite you now to your own reflection on these words.